Before I worked at Obsidian, I spent a couple years focusing on my personal writing, and before that, I was in transfer pricing at Ernst & Young for 2 years.
Oh wow, that's a bit of a shift.
Very big shift.
I always wanted to work in writing in some capacity, and it never really occurred to me that I was qualified to work in games. I just assumed there was some greater skill set beyond the writing itself that I didn't have a grip on, like programming or something like that.
Well, I remember coming onto the project not knowing what it was about. And I had a feeling that Obsidian wanted to do a New Vegas-y thing again. Because as I had heard, well, this is something that fans really want. You know, New Vegas is a well-loved game that's aged really well. And we wanted to, after we did Pillars, we felt like we could, you know, we'd wet our feet a little bit and we could do something original on our own. So we're like, well, let's do something in that vein.
That was one of the reasons I wanted to come to Obsidian. I'm a huge fan of their games. And especially like when I played the first Pillars of Eternity, I was like, oh my gosh, the writing just like blew me out of the water. And so, because I have a background in writing, one of the things that I was looking for was someone who I thought, this person knows way more than I do, and they can teach me a lot. And so I feel like I've definitely had that working here.
Yeah, with Pillars and with Outer Worlds as well, there's definitely been a push to have a specialized narrative team. I don't think that was always the case at the studio, even though Obsidian's been known for narrative. And I think that's allowed us to handle a lot more narrative, to get a lot more depth and complexity in our characters, and obviously to be more nimble with revisions.
Because of the nature of games, you rely heavily on plot, and characters sometimes take a back seat, and I was just trying to flip that. It's like, no, we have to really concentrate on our characters. It's like, sure, we want a good story, but if we have to cut corners in our story, that's okay. These characters need to be entertaining to talk to, because I knew that was, you know, the main thing people want to see from an Obsidian RPG is really interesting characters and stories. That was our #1 focus on that side.
Hello and welcome back to our series on the design of the Outer Worlds. In this video we take a look at one of the most critical departments at Obsidian, the writing team. The team, led by Leonard Boyarsky, are responsible for creating every character in the game, from the quest givers that send you on your way to the companions who join you on your adventures. Today we're going to have a look at the design of a bunch of these characters. We'll keep away from endgame spoilers, of course, but if you've yet to complete Parvati, Ellie, or Vicar Max's companion quests, fair warning. Just hit subscribe and come back and watch one of the next videos. Okay, looks like we're all ready to go, but before we set off on our adventure, it's probably best we check in with Ada.
Basically, a lot of what happens in game writing jobs, in my opinion, is you'll have, you know, your game director or a lead narrative or, you know, whoever the bosses are, and they'll kind of say, hey, we really want this thing. And usually they'll give you some specifics on it. Sometimes it's pretty nebulous, but in the case of Ada, they knew that they wanted her to be the player ship. They did not want her to obviously seem sentient, because in our world robots are not sentient and she's a special case, but they wanted the player to learn that as they play through the game. So when she first is talking to you, she's trying to appear as, you know, just like very robotic. But the longer you interact with her and she becomes emotionally attached to you, you kind of get the sense that, you know, there's something more beneath the surface.
He was quite delighted when I crafted one in order to better engage with him. It was basic in the beginning.
We immediately said, okay, there should be a computer on your ship as kind of like our fallback, because we wanted to be able to kill every NPC in the game. That's for some reason, we're always adamant about that. I don't know what that says about us. But we're like, well, if you have a computer on the ship, you can't kill her.
We gave them the instructions that we viewed our robots and AI like Star Wars. They were mechanical, they were not sentient though. And so we told the writer that Ada has to come across as sounding like she might be sentient, but she's not. She's totally not. So that's why she says things like, I'm programmed to say that I missed you while you were gone. You know, because she's probably just telling you she misses you, but she's not allowed to really be alive.
I preferred to think of it like she was hiding the fact that she was actually sentient, which is supposed to be the big question. A lot of people have said, no, she's obviously sentient. I'm like, we should have maybe tried a little bit harder to make it obvious that she was trying to hide it.
Ellie at Sublight even makes a joke when she finds out you've taken over the ship. And she says, well, have you disconnected Ada? I kept telling the captain he shouldn't have made that cross-wired monstrosity or whatever. And you're like, no, I like her. I'm keeping her around. Actually, you call it it, and Parvati calls her. Parvati actually calls you out once for, why do you always call Ada an it?
The time where I thought I'd noticed it was when she started flirting with Sam.
Oh yeah, that I didn't know that was coming actually. And so the first time I went in there and that was happening, I was like, what's going on here? Because we were trying to have things that happened on the ship. And often we wanted it to be between characters, but Sam was hard to have him interact with a lot of the other characters. So she was like, well, he can interact with Ada.
I haven't cleaned my internals in ages. Can you hardly process the sheer quantity of dust built up in there? Tell me you've seen worse.
Oh, so we originally knew that we wanted to do 6 companions, and the 6th companion, unfortunately, I can't tell you about, but he was like fully fleshed out. But then again, we ran into a like, hey, you know, looking at our timeline, our budget, it would just turn into, we don't want to crunch the team, so we decided to cut one of the companions, but then people were bummed out that we were only going to have 5. So then someone proposed, I think Tim was like, well, what if we just had a companion that was kind of like dog meat, like he's very resource light, he doesn't talk, blah, blah, blah. So we kind of said, let's have a robot companion. And I think the original concept for him was that he was going to be extremely robotic and just give interfacing type commands like wash mode on. But because he was a companion, I wanted to try and fit as much personality into him and make him really memorable as possible. And so I thought like, okay, well, if he's a janitor robot, what if he has a bunch of cleaning slogans that he could say, and I thought it might be interesting if the company actually hired someone to come in and like voice record all these lines. So then I just thought he's kind of like those old-timey like jukeboxes, so then it gives him a little bit more of a personality of like he has all these pre-recorded lines and he can whip them out as he thinks is appropriate or not, but because he's not sentient, sometimes he gets it wrong and is like really out of context.
This process would be extremely tenuous for one such as yourself.
I'm committed, no matter the cost.
It was a really nice design goal in that if you compare him with like Parvati, she has something like 24,000 words in the game, and Sam has something like 500. So it was nice that we could like repeat a bunch of his lines and save on recording and stuff like that.
Got stubborn stains. Leave them for Sam.
And also he's nice because some players really like to do the lone path route, you know, like they don't want to take full companions, but they also want someone to help them in combat or like, you know, carry extra weight. So he's a nice alternative there.
I think one thing that the writing team does have to do on any game, especially a really big game like this, is kind of take stock of what kind of personalities and angles have already been explored. Like one thing we would see on Deadfire with kind of a lot of the like temp characterizations that would be pushed to us is like everyone wants this NPC to be a sassy jackass, you know, and it's like, okay, that's funny a few times, but like eventually you have to find something different. I think this is where you get a lot of benefits out of having sort of a writer's room type environment where people are communicating about what they're working on, people are looking at each other's work, people are playing the rest of the game, and hopefully taking stock of what's being done elsewhere.
Well, new business turns up at last. Celia, didn't I tell you our new statistics-based advertising model would be a hit?
So I remember Sanjar was pretty tough. He was one of those, like, I really had to struggle to figure him out and to learn to love him, but by the end I had a great time with him. When I joined the Monarch team, there had already been a fair bit of iteration on that, and so there was kind of some rough writing in place, and we understood that Sanjar was going to be this bureaucrat. Like, we understood his place in the story of Monarch and in the story of the game. So we knew that he was going to be this, you know, bureaucrat, and he genuinely wanted to improve like his Stellar Bay and his people, like through a more compassionate application of bureaucracy. So like sitting down to write this guy, my first thought is, oh my gosh, how do I make a guy who loves spreadsheets interesting? Like this could come off so dry.
Never realized fighting the bureaucracy could be this interesting.
It is quite the rush.
So after playing with it a little bit, I decided to really lean into him as this sort of adorably awkward character who just really gets super excited about the numbers in a way that nobody does, but that we could, you know, dig into as a character quirk for him. And also someone who really enjoys and romanticizes the player is like, ooh, you're this, you know, dashing Han Solo type, and now I'm, you know, in cahoots with you. This is so interesting. But yeah, I think one challenge with the quest giver in particular is giving that character authority in their role, but also not having them lorded over the player. And like every player is going to have a different level of tolerance for certain personality types and different things that they find interesting or, trite. The player's driving their own experience and they want to feel that they are. And so having an NPC or a quest giver come in and say, you're going to do this because I said so, or you're going to do this because I'm technically your boss. And the player's like, yeah, who are you? Like even in Mass Effect, even though Shepard, ostensibly reports to the Admiral and reports to the Council, the game makes it a point very early to kind of insulate Shepard as this independent solo authority within that chain of command. And I think that's really valuable for making the player feel like they're not just constantly reporting to other people, but that they have, agency in the world and say over who they are in it. Because Sanjar kind of goes off on his own tangents so much and is in such a different headspace, a character like Celia is really useful for bringing the conversation back to where you need it to go. There was an earlier vision of her character as someone who was a little bit awkward and creepy, which made her romance quest with Sebastian read kind of oddly. The original, I think, idea was that she really wanted to get a date with this guy, and Sebastian was very normal, and Celia would not, basically, like, she wouldn't give him his license to sell stuff until he went on a date. But reading that in the Me Too era, it was like, ooh, let's try something different. Like, what if she's just very businesslike, but then smitten with this guy, and this guy's just totally oblivious? And then, nobody's creepy, you can still have fun with it, you can still find humor in this person who's, again, very competent, but then suddenly does not know what to do with themselves.
Look at me going on. I'm sure you've got other things to do, and Mr. Nandi's giving me that back to work look.
So I think a lot of the companion writing is phenomenal. All of our writers did great jobs of bringing unique voices and distinct real characters to this environment, and then the voice actors did phenomenal jobs actually portraying those and making them relatable and interesting. Like Parvati, for example, there was a point where we were afraid that her actual companion quest was going to be the worst one in the game, because there's a point when we first do our writing, we do temporary text-to-speech generation. So it's all very robo voice, no inflection, no delivery at all. And that quest was boring. We were like, should we just cut this entirely and not even try and ship it? And then we get the actual voice acting back, and it elevates it to a level that just wasn't there in the actual quest designer gameplay. So it's those different elements coming together that's kind of the magic of games, that once you start getting the art and the audio and the voice acting into the game, it becomes real for you as well. For players who are brand new to this type of game and to this world, she's kind of as wide-eyed and innocent as they are to a certain point, and because she's just so excited to be on this journey, she kind of mirrors that excitement players have, that the chance to explore a brand new game, brand new environment. She was kind of the voice of that. And then seeing just the incredible depth Ashley Birch brought to the performance of the voice acting, that was phenomenal to see as well.
To Mr. Thompson, a person's a gear. It does its job quiet-like. If it squeaks or stutters, it gets replaced. The deserters are decent folk. I knew some of them before they left.
I think personally the reason she stands out so much is she's like this little glimmer of goodness in an otherwise horrible world. And it's easy to latch on to that kind of character. And she also latches onto you in a way that's very nice. When she is about to leave with you on the ship for the first time, and she sees the ship, and she looks back at her old life, and she just really, really, really wants to get out of here.
I want to ask you something, and you can say no. But can I come with you? I could tend to your engine. I know my G-valves from my catalyzers, and I can keep your ship singing. And if you ever need a pair of eyes watching your back, I can do that too. What do you think?
I think all of us can kinda understand that, right? All of us have something that we're aspiring toward, and when you get a chance to go do that, or when you see the opportunity to go do that, you just jump for it. That humanity in Parvati, I think, makes her very endearing. Also, her dinner with Jinlei. It's just so sweet. It's just so fundamentally, basically sweet. Everything else in this game is let's go be a mercenary, let's go shoot up some bored thugs, let's go shake some people down for money. And here's let me be a wingman to my best friend, help her out a little bit. It feels good, It's one of those moments that just genuinely feel good.
Oh, Captain. I'm pining for June like something fierce. What am I doing?
Ashley Birch was just perfect for the role. I was so happy. I remember we were in Slack and we were going through our list of actors trying to find good actors for our game, and our audio director pinged me and said, "Hey, Ashley Birch for Parvati," and I was like, "Do it. Just don't even look back. I don't care what it takes. We have to make that happen." And I'm so glad we did. She's perfect for that role.
Have you any interest in modeling?
What? Oh, no, ma'am. All them eyes staring at me? I couldn't. No way, no how. I get scared just thinking on it.
I really like Carrie's work with Ellie's parents.
Marilyn, is that you?
Laws, we certainly didn't expect to see you like this.
And the role that the player plays as this grizzly, messed up, grungy kind of captain that's trying to throw her parents off their balance, and the way it kind of weaves into this insurance scam for some reason, it's so ridiculous, but just so cleverly done.
Do you get on with your parents?
I do, yes. I think I really enjoy finding contrast in characters. I think those are interesting opportunities to find depth and also humor. So just Celia's competent until she's not. Ellie's very assured and, removed and tough about things until suddenly you find this one thing that's still a really big source of hurt for her, even if she won't admit it. Yeah, I think in some of the earlier conceptions, she was still fairly sharp and acerbic, but she would point that wit at the player a bit more. And I think that's something that can come across well to some players. And again, it's a question of individual player tolerance, but I wanted her very much to be someone who's always letting the player in on the joke, rather than making the player the butt of the joke.
Anyway, enough of the touchy-feelies, huh?
You can do the latter sometimes, but you have to be careful. And if you do it too often, then your player's just gonna ask well, why am I paying to have this person follow me around? I'd rather hang out with someone who's nice to me, or again, at least includes me in the joke.
I'm not dead. I just never wanted to talk to you again.
I'm afraid the distinction was lost on us, darling.
Her parents, I think, were an interesting opportunity to dig into the side of Byzantine society that you don't see quite as much when you're just talking to the people on the corporate side of things. The idea for Byzantium was always yes, it's the center of the corporations, and socially, it's a place with a very established pecking order. People are very concerned about prestige. It's not something that people work for, it's really just something that people have. And prestige is very important, appearances are very important, but those aren't things that you earn through work or merit. They're things that you're just kind of born with, and not working is sort of a sign of prestige. And I think that's also illustrated really well with Hortense Inglesby, who was written by Mark Soskin, one of our area designers. But with Ellie's parents, that was because they're sort of outside the corporate structure in terms of the players' interactions with them, that was a unique opportunity to show, okay, yes, this is what the social life of Byzantium is like and what people are concerned about. If you imagine the Victorian parents are scandalized by what their daughter's up to, which is exactly what Ellie wants when you first start that interaction. But then it turns out that they're not just scandalized, they actually would just rather her leave, and that's what she doesn't want. So I think showing that shift was a way to transition that interaction from something that just kind of starts out as comedy to then something that does have a little more tragedy behind it, and something for Ellie's personality, and also something to show just how, even if we're laughing at Byzantine society, there's actually something really sad and alienating about it too.
Don't you ever want a little fun? Maybe see a marauder ship get blown to bits overhead?
What a thing to say. Everyone knows marauders can't fly.
I also Nyoka is a fantastic character, and that was Dan McPhee. And the work, I know he came up with that character pretty early and really iterated and worked on her. And I just love her whole arc of starting off as this tough huntress who's taking you through Monarch and killing some monsters for you, and then it goes to a kind of a sad, bittersweet place where she remembers her fallen comrades. That's fantastic.
Welcome back. Drink, chat, or business? All of the above?
I love characters who have arcs. They start off in one direction and they go in another direction, and you're there with them for that journey. Nyoka's arc was good enough that we could slot it into a relatively short frame of the game. You know, you pick her up midway through the game and you can finish up before you're done, and it still feels pretty satisfying. Plus, all her interactions with Sam are amazing. If you want to see Nyoka drunk in her in her room while Sam is like trying to hose her down with water.
Human, you are in violation of Cleanliness Ordinance 8886.
You know, Obsidian's been making these games for a long time as well as a company. So their tools are, especially their quest tool and their dialogue tool, are geared towards making these things. In Arcanum, I was writing dialogues in Excel. And that is not fun when you're trying to do a branching dialogue. You're scrolling all over the place trying to figure out where everything's going. Obsidian's dialogue tool is a flowchart, and you could see where it's going and you kind of see all the links. So that makes it a lot easier.
Okay, yeah, so I thought you guys might want to see the tools because a lot of people are like, hey, I'd love to be a writer in the games industry, and if you're going to be a writer at Obsidian, this is kind of what it looks like. The way that we build out our conversations is these are nodes, and within the nodes we have the string. So you can, the nodes will have like different scripting on them and conditional checks and stuff like that, and then the string within it is the actual text that displays. So for example, right here, you can ask Ada like, hey, do you have a favorite among the crew? It's me, right? And then we check, do you have any companions with you? If you don't, then she'll say this line, which is like, well, you're the only crew member, so by default it's you. If you do have companions, then it will actually go to this line where she's like, can you explain more about what you're talking about? And then it'll progress through the conversation. This conversation has 601 nodes in it. And then to give you an idea, this is like Sam's banter, so you can see this conversation is much smaller. So right. This is his, when he's talking with other companions as running around the world in the game. This is pretty straightforward. And this one is much more spiderwebby.
This is a tool that was built in-house?
Yes, it was built in-house, and they've been using it for about, I think, 7 years, and we just keep adding on to it. But I think this is the third studio that I've worked at in-house, and I think these are like by far the strongest game writing tools that I've worked with.
What type of problems are they solving for you?
It makes organization, especially for branching dialogue, much easier. I can't imagine trying to write a conversation of this size in like an Excel spreadsheet or doing it in Word.
So we came up with Phineas, very quickly because we were watching Rick and Morty at the time, and I really loved Walter Bishop from Fringe. And I'm like, wow, that's a really interesting juxtaposition. Two mad scientists with really different, backgrounds. But even when you dig below the surface on both of them, they kind of have this very interesting backstory, and they both really care, even though Rick tries to hide a lot more. So that was kind of like we immediately mashed them together to become Phineas.
Vicar Maximilian de Soto at your service, or Vicar Max if you're the sort who prefers brevity.
So I originally pictured him as with a totally different voice. So when I heard him voiced in game, I was like, wow, he sounded kind of like Alec Baldwin to me. And I was like, he was much more charismatic when I heard the voice, which was really interesting. When I was writing him, I pictured more of that like gruff, Southern priest, like traveling priest type. But I think him having a more charismatic voice was actually a better fit for him because it made him more likable, whereas he can be a very, he's kind of arrogant and honestly, I think a little bit dickish at times. So that really helped his character. I also tried to bring a little bit of humor into him in that I think Leonard is like very serious and he has very dark humor, which resonates really well. And then occasionally, like in some of Vicar Max's combat lines, I tried to add like a little bit of silliness.
Sometimes violence is the only way.
Here's a little move I learned in prison, and he'll say like, I'll take your confession now and stuff like that. Like it's a little bit like, I don't know if his character would, if I was being like 100% true to the seriousness of that character, I don't know if he would say that, but then it just felt really good in combat, and Leonard approved it, which is nice. So I think he was kind of like, I had to win him over a little bit on those type of lines.
I am content. I've finally found what I was looking for, even though I was looking for the wrong thing.
He starts out as a character who you're not really sure about it. And it seems like he's not really interested in the religion. He's just into this, whatever the hell he's pursuing, and it turns out that he really, really wants to have the religious experience that he never has had. Just how that changes your perception of reality and how changes your perception of the world. And just playing around with that seemed really interesting to me. It was kind of an example for what I wanted our characters to be in terms of like depth and in terms of really digging into what was driving them and having them be not what they seem to be on the surface, which I really feel is compelling.
They had a lot of goals to reach when they were writing these characters, and so it was really hard, but I think they did a great job.
It was a lot of work, and there was a lot of writing that went into Outer Worlds in a very short amount of time. And I really like their dynamic. Leonard is very much into like stories that leave you feeling a little bit haunted and troubled and uncomfortable. And Tim is very much into stories that make you laugh out loud and have ridiculous characters. So writing for, like, if I get approval from both of them, then I think the writing has hit the right balance, because it's got both in it sometimes. I usually let them hash out their own arguments as to whether something is too Tim and too Leonard, and I keep my hands off that, and I just take whatever orders come to my desk. But it's nice working for them, because I think like when you do the right thing and you write in a way that is true to the game, they both end up liking it for their own reasons.
What's it like to work here?
I really enjoy it. I mean, I've stayed for over 6 years now. I think what I really enjoy about it is the environment and the relationships are pretty informal. There's the understanding, I think, that good ideas can come from anywhere. You know, the studio is big enough to be working on, a number of exciting things at any given time, but small enough that most people can get to know each other reasonably well and also feel pretty involved with the entire process of a game that they're working on. We're not so big that people are sort of siloed in their own departments, and I think it definitely feels nice to be able to touch the game as a whole and kind of see it from start to finish. It is a lot of fun, and it's fun too, because I think the understanding we have right now of narrative in games and how important and meaningful that can be is like, this is still such a young industry, and this is a pretty young specialization in a young industry. So it feels like there's a lot of room to grow, definitely still a lot of path to be paved, and a lot of room for us to figure out, like, how do we want to do this? How do we want to tell stories?
Come here. You've tried the best now. Now try the rest. Spacer's choice. Oh, wow, that stings. Looks like the bleeding stopped. I owe you one. Hope you don't mind me omitting this little exchange from my report. Spacer's choice doesn't like us accepting outside help. Better, thanks to you. I might have bled out on my own. Or worse, had to go begging the boss for some Adrena time. We were out on patrol. I saw a marauder camp up in the hills. Thought I could take him. Then my gun misfired. Right through my side. I mean, what are the odds of that, right? Just barely scraped by with my life. Crawled in here and blocked off the exit with those canisters. Gibbering, flesh-eating, law-breaking, unemployed lunatics with guns. Some hull had grounded their spacecraft out in the open. That's a real good way to attract marauders. See those canisters by the entrance? Marauders come sniffing around in here, and I can take them all out with a single shot. Not bad, huh? Yeah, okay. You look like you know your way around a gun. Got some spare ammo, not counting the bullet in my side. Here, you can have my saber too, for patching me up and all. All Spacer's Choice weapons are now 30% less likely to malfunction. You've tried the best, now try the rest. Spacer's Choice. Yes, nailed it that time. You hit your head or something? You're in Emerald Vale. We're a Spacer's Choice community. Edgewater's a little ways down. Prettiest place in the Vale. Be sure to stop by a provisioner's for a can of our famous salt tuna. The Hope? Is that some sort of fancy new drug? Are you with Auntie Cleo or something? Don't take this the wrong way or nothing, but I'm not allowed to fraternize with Cleo workers. Company policy.